As any ash seeks fire, you will surely help me. My lady lives in the cold land of Ariandel. I need you to show her flame, a proper flame that will burn the rot away. You will thank me when it's done.
Thou art ash. Thou hast a pact made with Uncle Gale, so I wish to tell thee all.
I've seen your kind, time and time again. Every fleeing man must be caught. Every secret must be unearthed. Such is the conceit of the self-proclaimed seeker of truth. But in the end, you lack the stomach for the agony that you'll bring upon yourself.
As ashes will be, ever seeking fire. Return from whence thou camest, for that is thy place of belonging.
Holy shit. We're not welcome here. Hi, I'm Bob the Hollow, here to talk about the Painted World of Ariandel. Let me start by saying that the DLC is really good, albeit a little short. From a lore hunting perspective, it follows Dark Souls DLC's grand tradition of answering mostly its own questions, rather than those presented in the main game. But it does bring closure to a very old mystery that we've had since Dark Souls 1, and that is all I could ask for. But I'll get to that in a bit. Let's start with the easier stuff. Some of the lore seems to require no further explanation, so I'll just mention it briefly. For instance, the story that led the Millwood Knights out of their home and into the painting seems to be all fleshed out in the item descriptions related to them. I would like to know who the Abyss Dragon is, but unless we get an answer in the next DLC, he'll most likely remain a mystery. It could be a reference to Calamite, but it's doubtful since, at least to my knowledge, he was never related to the Abyss. Sullivan is mentioned in 2 spells. They only serve to state that he was born in the Painted World. A very simple statement, although for me, personally, it actually carries some weight, since it might support my theories that he was involved with the Xanthous scholars and that he would eventually work in tandem with Londor. The optional boss, Champion's Gravetender, is actually kind of a letdown, to be honest. The fight is cool, but it's way too easy. It fits the lore since we're not fighting the actual champion, but his page instead, but they could have gotten creative with it to make it more interesting. And there doesn't seem to be any lore to this champion other than the fact that he created the undead match. And lastly, we have the Pharaon followers. I was really excited when I read the first item description regarding the followers, but that eventually faded away when I realized that they wouldn't be adding anything to the lore of the Legion, besides themselves, that is. Now, besides the simplistic nature of what I have mentioned so far, this DLC actually does answer some questions both old and new. The more pertinent one being, what is the Painted World? Well, the Painted World of Ariamis in Dark Souls 1 gave us a very clear picture that it had deep connections with Velka, goddess of sin. Many theorized that it had been created by her, and it certainly felt like it, but I could never get over the fact that Priscilla said it had been created by him. Not her, him. The name Ariamis could have been a reference to the place itself, but given this line of dialogue, it was most likely the name of its creator. With that in mind, I could never attribute the Painted World to Velka. And Dark Souls 1 never gave us a reason as to why she would have created it in the first place. I really wanted it to be Velka, I guess everybody did, but it just didn't fit. And now, many years later, along came Ariandel. Ashes of Ariandel tells us the story of the Painted World, a world that, like ours, hinges on a cycle based on fire. But unlike ours, where fire is meant to prolong it, here, fire is meant to burn it down so they can start anew. A blank canvas for a new painted world. Currently, this world is named after Father Ariandel, restorer of the painting, and it would have been created after the last one burned down, presumably the painted world of Ariamis. And likewise, that world would have been named after the man who painted it, Ariamis. That enables Velka to be the creator. She created the world, the canvas, if you may, and Ariamis simply painted upon it. And that world doesn't even have to be the first one. So, now that's out of the way, all we need is a reason, and Ariandel gave us that as well. The reason is this little girl. Ever since their first appearance, the statues of Velka have had a child at its side. That doesn't fit with her description as a goddess of sin, deliverer of justice, so it's unlikely to be symbolic. But a child was never mentioned in her lore. That is, until now.
Don't worry. I haven't forgotten, Mother.
The painted world is a refuge from the outside world. I don't think the goddess of sin would have cared enough about the forlorn to create this world, but she would definitely have cared enough about her own daughter. Velka knew all too well that in the world of gods, serpents and men, all were guilty. They all had sins to answer for. So she created this safe haven where her daughter could be free from war, death, manipulation, and even the curse of hollowing. The statue of Velka can reverse hollowing, and Father Ariandel himself seems quite hollow but still very right-minded, untouched by the maddening of hollowing. And I also think that Velka paid the ultimate price to save her daughter. This mystical ring was created in a sacrificial rite of Velka, the goddess of sin. Its wearer will lose nothing upon death, but the ring itself breaks. A sacrifice is only worth as much as the life it spares. The painted world is painted with blood. In the line, a sacrifice is only worth as much as the life it spares, was added specifically for Dark Souls 3. This explains why she has never appeared in the series except for descriptions and references, and why her followers end up in the painted world as well. They themselves are also forlorn, for their mistress is no more. The girl's dialogue even sounds like her mother, Velka, is already dead. Velka sacrificed herself to spare her daughter, for what life would be worth as much for a mother? Now that we know what the painted world is, let's talk about its current installment. The main characters for its plotline are Father Ariandel and Alfreda of Londor. The Good Father, as we said before, is the restorer of the painting. This world that we see is his vision. He was definitely a cleric, for his flail is meant to increase the power of his miracles. I think he was originally of the Way of White in Lothric, and I think that by the time he restored the painting, he was already a follower of the Goddess of Sin. Clerics of the Way of White can also become forlorns of the painted world, judging by the presence of the miracle Way of White Corona, whose owner, by the way, became forlorn on the account of his yearning for the gods of old. The old pantheon is gone, and all that is left for the Way of White is to revere dead deities. And these statues are a telltale sign of his roots. At first glance, you might think they are of Velka, but they are actually statues of the High Priestess, the same statue found all around Lothric Castle. So he was of the Way of White, but became disillusioned with his own faith. Literally casting the kiln into the depths is a very strong symbolic gesture on his part, and given his crow-feathered garb, the statue of Velka in his chapel, and the cleansing chapel altar in the little church where you find the Way of White Corona, I'd say that his devotion lied with Velka. at least until Alfreda came along. Alfreda is also originally from Lothric. She's an unkindled, just like us, and is most likely the woman mentioned in the Hollow's ashes found in the untended graves. The first impression you might get from her is that she has forsaken Londor and its goals, but that would be a grave mistake. I know it's easy to assume that, but Dark Souls lore is never easy. The first thing you should consider is the description on her weapon. In the painting, the scythe is a symbol of a long-lost home, possibly explaining Alfreda's preference for it. She has, indeed, left Londor to live in the Painted World, but she still longs for the Hollow Realm. And if you approach her as the Lord of Hollows, her dialogue changes ever slightly and is indicative of her allegiance. Both her and Wilhelm are aware of your title.
Well, well. You're Lady Uria's Lord of Hollows.
Showing that she still has ties to Londor in the outside world. She shows reverence to you.
Ah yes, there is a thing thou shouldst by rights possess, a remembrance of this cold world for the great Lord of Londor.
And, like the scythe, it shows that she yearns for her home.
Now, return from whence thou camest. Thou'st a place in that world, and that alone is cause to rejoice.
But most importantly, she understands the importance of your duty.
Lord of Hollows, I know not the missteps which led thee to this painted world, but thy duty is all, and thy duty lieth elsewhere.
Granted, she says the same thing if you're not the Lord of Hollows, but in my video about Lothric, I talked about how the Unkindled Ones were secretly created to pursue Londor's goals, and her stance towards the duty of both the Unkindled and the Lord of Hollows supports that. And just like Velka sacrificed herself to save her daughter, in her eyes, Alfreda is sacrificing herself to save the rotting forlorn, by renouncing everything to keep the flame from consuming the Painted World. She's continuing the work of the Sable Church, who aims to stop the linking of the First Flame in the name of Hollows. You could even say she established a new Sable Church inside the Painted World. We've learned from Yuria in the main game that the Primordial Serpent Calf is behind Londor, and it is really quite befitting. On the doors at the entrance to the chapel, you see two engraved snakes, and again upon the panels in the hall of Father Ariandel. I would assume that these two women are Alfreda's sisters. The one on the right is Yuria, for she is the swordswoman. The one on the left, holding one of the snakes, seems to be placing it for the supplicants below. And she would be Liliane, for she is said to recount tales that portray the suffering and conflict of Hollows, filling the role of a cleric that conveys the teachings of its faith to its people. And behind Father Ariandel himself, there is a wooden statue of a woman dressed up as a snake. After he burns down the panels, you can find to his sides two wooden altars that are empty. Given his original worship of Velka, I'd say that the statues used to be of her, that it used to be upon these altars, but has been removed and subverted into the worship of the Primordial Serpents, masters of the Hollow Realm of Londor. Ariandel and Alfreda will see the world brought before they see it burn. Now, before I move on to my final thoughts regarding the Painted World, there are a few side notes that I'd like to make. Wilhelm's armor can be found in the pit below the chapel, among the dead. I thought up two theories for this one, but they're both too thin, I couldn't possibly present them as facts. First, there is the contraption key. After Sir Wilhelm led a white-haired woman to the attic of the library, he kept this key as if it were his life. I think this could be literal. Maybe he died here, in the Painted World. He had one invasion left in him, and it lasted this long. He cannot leave, and if they paint a new world, he'll disappear with this one. And second, there is his armor. The black armor of Wilhelm, Knight of London, and a nice feat for Anneling Hollow. Maybe Anneling Hollow is their way of saying that this doesn't have to be Wilhelm at all. Maybe Wilhelm died long ago and somebody else has taken his place. They're both possible, but somewhat unlikely, so I'll just leave it at that. I have mentioned the cleansing chapel earlier in the video, saying that it was related to Velka. Well, the Cathedral of the Deep was originally used for the worship of Velka. The statues of these men seem reminiscent of the crow association with Velka, and the statues of the crying women seem like the statue of Velka found in the undead settlement. When we first meet Gale, he's praying to one of these statues. The deacons have placed themselves in front of it, but she's still there. Also, even though I don't think London worships Velka, they still have her in high regards. They make use of her miracles and items, and Yuri is basically dressed as a crow. This one is really unimportant, but have you noticed that sometimes when you leave the room, the painter will wave you goodbye? And I still think that the painter being Velka's daughter makes more sense than being Priscilla's. But considering her scales and her eyes, it makes me think that maybe Priscilla was Velka's daughter as well. Maybe taking her away from Velka could have been the sin that the gods had committed. But I have nothing else to support this, so I'm leaving it for now. When you leave the depths of Ariandel, you find a titanite slab on top of this very long flight of stairs. And given the holy nature of these slabs, I think this is symbolic, an ascension from the depths to the divine. And this one actually has many parts to it. The chair upon which Father Ariandel is sitting seems to be the same one from this painting. I don't know who this woman is, but I think she might be the one from the hidden dialogue. Oh, and there's a hidden dialogue. It's quite creepy, you should listen to it. And, well, this. It feels like I should do something. I tried fire, dark, the snake rings, even my own goddamn blood. Are they trolling me? I think they're trolling me. God damn it. Okay, so, at the end of the video, let's talk about what we hear at the end of the DLC.
Those who aren't kin to fire cannot paint a world.
Fire is the key, and those not kin to fire cannot paint. Velka, being a goddess, found a soul in the first flame, just like the other gods. Her Lord Soul is the source of her power. It is the source of the power of the painted world. The Lord vessel held by Ariandel most likely holds that very same soul, and you must understand fire to wield it.
Those absorbed by fire must not paint a world.
And those embraced by fire, by the need to either link or usurp the first flame, must not paint. Velka, true to her nature as a rogue deity, had no allegiances and wished the painting to remain as such. And the pigment for the girl's painting, the dark soul of man that Gale is looking for, it could be either an actual person, the next restorer, or the key to a new kind of painting. The next painting could be the setup for the next DLC, but I hope it isn't. I would rather see the lore for different areas and characters. A trip to London would be nice.
Where have you gone, sweet child? It's cold outside, so awfully cold. Where have you run off to? I'm here, sweet child, right here. You're cold and you've no place to go. You're mine, sweet child, all mine. So run home, sweet child, run home. You know you've no place to go. You're mine, sweet child, all mine. You know you've no place to go. You're mine, sweet child, all mine. Forgive me. Sweet child, you've no place to go. Ah, where have you gone, sweet child?